Council, let's start out with agenda and anything on consent. Anybody have a question? Councilor Akkervall.
I had a question that I just wanted to bring up that I asked our assistant city attorney earlier about the item that was on consent agenda. And as far as when people would be notified of this change that would be coming down the chute, because I was concerned that that communication needs to happen in a effective way for the citizens that will be.
So this is the cable franchise?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I don't know if you wanted to explain your response.
Sure.
I thought it was a good response and it gave me confidence, but I just wanted to bring that to the rest of the group as well.
So I got a response back from Jessica Epley, who is our point person right now at Frontier and who will be transitioning over to Northwest Fiber. So she will continue to be the same point person that we'll have, which is great. What she said is customer notices will go out approximately 60 days prior to the close of the transaction of the transfer of control. And that, as she says, Northwest Fiber has been saying that if you don't know the new name by the time of the transaction closes, we have failed to do our jobs, and customers will be well informed about the transition of their services. So the city will also make sure that we're putting out information about the transition. The transaction won't close until all approvals are done. Right now, they are still waiting for the Oregon Public Utilities Commission to confirm their the transfer. And so that is estimated to happen in early 2020, and they're estimating a final transfer of authority sometime in probably by June 2020. So we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And Jessica is also willing to come and talk to the council about the transition if the council's interested. She was at another city council meeting tonight, so she wasn't able to attend, but she could come to a subsequent meeting and talk with the council if the council wishes.
So this item has raised a couple of questions in my mind. The first is that my personal experience is that Frontier's service is deteriorating, and several people I know have experienced similar. So within the resolution, come back here. There's a statement that says, based on all relevant information, the City Council of the City of Wilsonville finds that Northwest Fiber has the necessary legal, technical, and financial qualifications to perform the required duties of the franchise agreement. Mm-hmm. How do I know that? If I'm saying I know that, and I have experienced some concerns functionally about whether they in fact do, or whether, I just don't know where this is going exactly.
Yeah, so the federal laws that govern transfer of authority are very narrow about what you can review when looking at those factors. And so basically there's an application that they filled out. And basically it's like, as long as they check the boxes, you really can't contest anything. But what I will say is the city staff has also heard from customers that same issue. And one of the things that, at least for me personally, gives me a little bit of comfort is that Jessica is newer to the Frontier Northwest Fiber and has been extremely responsive and will continue to be our point of contact. And the nice thing about doing this update is they're required to supply all this new contact information, parent structure, additional information that we haven't been getting. We got from Frontier when they first made a transition from Verizon back in 2009, but we haven't gotten updated information. So we're going to have all new contact information. So I feel more confident about that we will have a person to call when issues are going on that we haven't been able to have in the past.
So I guess I would like legal staff to tell me affirmatively that you have reviewed the allowable factors of consideration and you are recommending that they are being met as far as a legal structure.
I have reviewed and I do recommend. And as another point of comfort, even though we are not under the MAC, I'm forgetting, whatever the MAC acronym is that's in your staff report, even though we're not in their, we are not part of their coalition, they cover several jurisdictions in the Portland metro area, and they have already approved this transfer. So that's all they do, is they work on communication. issues and for franchisees, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else with regard to agenda or consent? Counselor Lehan?
I forgot to mention, but on my way in here, I was hearing about an airplane accident at Aurora
Haven't heard about it.
within the last hour.
Any staff?
No one knows that. Well, somebody
check
might want to
into it.
check
Yeah,
that there was something went wrong.
okay. All right, if there's no other concerns on that, let's move forward then into our scheduled discussion items. I guess any other concerns that haven't been brought up by council? I've been commenting about the paving for the last couple of meetings, and they've got that done, and they got the stripes painted, but they didn't get them very dry, so people drove over them and tracked them all over the freaking road.
So do they-
That will be fixed.
They'll fix
They'll
that.
fix
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I thought.
All right. So if there's nothing else, let's jump into our scheduled items, starting with tax increment financing zone expiration and redesign. Couldn't get an acronym for all of them.
All right, good evening, Council. Jordan Vance, Economic Development Manager, and I'm up here with Nick Popenook of Tiberius Solutions. We are back to discuss TIF zones and ultimately get direction on where we take the program. We can briefly recap the key points of the discussion of the presentation that we gave last month and then move into discussion. So by way of background, the tool was born out of the 2008 recession as a way to incent development on vacant warehouses and also serve as Wilsonville's version of an economic development tool and an enterprise zone. The program operates as site-specific urban renewal, but it's different in that we're not issuing debt for TIF zones. It's designed to convert vacant warehouses to high-value manufacturing facilities. And it's a unique program. Wilsonville is the only city in the state to offer a site-specific urban renewal program like this. It doesn't issue debt, but the program requires a certain level of investment and job creation. And if met, will offer a property rebate in return. By 2013, the program was established and applied to 6 properties, large vacant warehouses. And a year later, half of those properties were leased and removed from the program, leaving 3 remaining properties. By 2018, no businesses had utilized the program. And today we're here to propose a new direction for the program that will serve as a more flexible, effective development tool in the next recession. Here are the 6 properties included in the program. And as you can see, there are very large buildings ranging from 165 to 500,000 square feet. All these buildings developed organically on their own, and only one, Microsoft, invested significantly to convert the space into a higher value manufacturing facility. Currently, all buildings are occupied except for Microsoft, which left in 2017 as part of a global restructuring effort, and the eastern portion of Building 83, which is where Energy Storage Systems is. We now realize that the program criteria was perhaps aspirationally high. We were looking for up to $25 million in capital improvements and the creation of 75 new jobs at a certain wage level. Nobody has utilized the program to this date or been close to meeting all of these requirements. So for that reason, as part of the program redesign, we are proposing new qualifications and a tier of benefits as 2 key elements of the program, which I'll pass over to Nick to explain.
Okay, so as Jordan said, Nick Popenook with Tiberius Solutions, been working with the city on urban renewal issues for some time now. A few of the key things to highlight in terms of the program redesign that we're thinking of. On program qualifications, we are anticipating looking at the same metrics, the same factors, the value of new construction and equipment, the number of jobs and the wages that are offered, but looking at providing more flexibility than the current program had. So if an employer wants to come in and is offering twice the number of jobs, but doesn't quite hit the $25 million assessed value threshold, maybe there's a good reason to give them the benefit and not be so strict on all three of those different metrics. Along those lines, as Jordan mentioned, tiers of benefits. So rather than an all or nothing approach, there might be certain thresholds that you could hit that would be qualifying for some level of tax rebate, and other investments that would achieve a higher level of tax rebate. A major component of this proposed redesign is what we're calling the site agnostic approach. So in the past, you identified 6 specific properties out of the entire city, and those were the only properties where you could advertise and market this program. And as it turns out, those specific property owners wound up having other deals that came along, and they were able to get other tenants into those spaces, and the program was not used for those sites. This proposed approach would have this program be available anywhere in the city, except for in existing urban renewal areas. And that gives your economic development staff much more free rein to use this as an attractive tool to incentivize new development here or expansion of existing businesses. And just to reiterate, this is a tax rebate program, not a tax abatement program. That means that these folks would be paying their taxes first before they receive a check in the rebate amount. This means that you have less to worry about in terms of giving away money to a potential developer and then not having them live up to their end of the bargain, because they do have to pay their taxes, and you do get to double check that they meet all of the requirements before you wind up giving any money to these new developments. In terms of the timeline, we broke this sort of into 4 phases. The first, consensus on the proposed concept, really would end tonight, one way or the other, based on your feedback. And if this concept sounds good to you, then we move into the next phase, which is development of program details that would largely take place between now and the holidays. Then coming back in the new year would be looking at testing political support. That would include at least 1 meeting of the Urban Renewal Advisory Task Force. This is a group of knowledgeable folks who have been advising the city as needed for maybe 5 or more years now on a host of urban renewal issues, and it involves local citizens as well as representatives of affected taxing districts. So to get their feedback on the proposed approach, as well as obviously coming back to the city council when we have a more fleshed out program for you to review. There are options for additional levels of testing political support there, and this will be something that you'll want to weigh in on, maybe not tonight, but as this moves forward. And that's looking to see whether you'd like to do another advisory vote of the public with this type of a program, whether you'd like to have more sort of general public open houses and education on this topic, and whether there's more outreach that needs to be done to your specific taxing district partners that are always impacted by any urban renewal program. Once that political support is finished, if everything still looks good for this proposed program, then at the very end, the last phase is actually writing the plan and report templates. This approach of having it not be tied to any specific sites, but available citywide, means that if you have a developer in the future who wants to use the program, you would very quickly need to adopt an urban renewal plan to authorize it on that specific site. So what this approach does is provide you with templates that are all ready to go, and just sort of a fill-in-the-blanks approach to doing a new urban renewal plan if you have a qualifying developer you want to work with.
So you would need legal descriptions and all that stuff? Right?
Yeah. Though with site-specific properties, those legal descriptions could go more quickly.
Right. Got it.
So thank you, Nick. I think we can move into discussion. And just a final comment as a for economic development staff, I think this program design will be more effective due to added flexibility with the criteria, which will be more in tune with the marketplace and the levels of investment that we're seeing in the region. Added flexibility with location, so it takes the guesswork out and allows us to be immediately responsive. And also innovation and preparedness, I think, will set us apart by having a newly refreshed program in place by the time a recession hits. I can tell you the first question I usually get from a prospective business or developer is, what incentives do you have in place? And I think this will be a much more compelling program to talk about. So that concludes our question. Our presentation. We can move over to discussion.
Okay, so I would like to make one brief comment, and then I'll ask council what you're thinking. in my mind, the prior program, the intent was not to see how much money we could give away. It was to see if we could get those facilities functioning and contributing to the economic well-being and the job space within our city. And they all did. I mean, ultimately, without us, rebating money. So somewhere there's a sweet spot between, being too lenient with your standards that would allow companies to reap more benefit than is necessary. The amount that's necessary, in my mind, is the amount that's needed to get a viable project to locate here that otherwise is not going to locate here, not one that's ended up coming anyway. So there's a couple ways to look at the 6 that we tried, and I think there's at least a couple sides to that question. But ultimately, the question is, and as Jordan alluded to, there probably is going to come a downturn in the future at some point, and economics tells us that. And are we interested in being more strongly positioned with tools to enable us to continue to make economic progress in our community as that might come at some future time? If everything is working really well, we wouldn't probably need to use incentives, if everything is robust and companies are expanding and they're looking for places to go. And we have several examples recently in the community of companies that have come just because of the inherent advantage of being here and the facilities that are available here and that kind of thing. So what do you think? Councilor West.
So Tiberius, I don't know if you can kind of give an example of like, this business will come here and here's where it has been used in another similar city with kind of an industrial business hub like we have, and this is where it's been a benefit and a win-win for both, like a tangible kind of example. And then Jordan, I was wondering if you knew like what, I guess from both of you, I'm just looking for a little bit more specifics of like how that program changed. So besides like it would be open to anybody, what would the new cap be because the 25 million was too high? Are we looking for a certain number of employees to come, and then what would that number kind of be feasible? And then kind of dovetailing what the mayor said, making sure that we're using it as a win-win tool and not just like necessarily giving away things unnecessarily.
So I would interject, because we don't have all night to talk about it, that none of those parameters are proposed at this point in time. The next step would be figuring out the cost levels, the rebate levels, the number of employees, the economic, all of that would be something that staff would come back to council with a proposal, but that's not the discussion we're really having because we don't have that data right now.
And we will absolutely investigate that. So we will look at specific examples of buildings, of developments from across the state, maybe ones that have tried to locate or considered locating in Wilsonville. And we will evaluate how they would score under different scoring systems. And then we would look for both of your points as to, does this scoring system do what we want? Is it being too generous, giving away too many benefits, or is it still too stringent and nobody's qualifying? So we would look at those things as part of the analysis.
What about a locally grown business, like a startup that's just kind of getting going and doesn't have the capital to make that next move to, add a lot more jobs and more value to the tax base?
Well, one of the, and Nick, maybe you can talk about this. So one of the ideas is a weighted framework. So we had that high threshold of 25 million, 75 new jobs. We've seen examples where users may be higher on one threshold and lower on the other. Right. So it would go into a weighted point system, and they still might be eligible for a tier of rebate. So say they were investing 7 million in improvements in the building, which is under on the investment cap, but we're creating 200 new jobs. And would a rebate put this project over the edge? So in this new framework, that could be an option. In terms of local users, I guess if they were redeveloping an existing building and investing in it, they could potentially qualify.
I'm just wondering that on the criteria side, do we have the ability to design a program that would give more weight to a business that's in Wilsonville right now?
Yes.
That is looking to move somewhere else if they, can't secure the capital they need?
And you absolutely do have that. So that's one of the key highlights here is the ability to have flexibility to establish the criteria that this council think is most important, rather than just copying what was in the original enterprise zone
Right.
benefits. And so one thing that I've been thinking about personally, as I do a lot of property tax work, is the assessed value limits that are in the enterprise zone program don't distinguish between buildings and equipment.
Right.
Equipment depreciates rapidly over time. If you're giving a rebate on the taxes paid on that equipment, 3-4 years from now, the equipment's not worth nearly as much as it was up front. You might say, well, that's not getting us a good deal. Let's incentivize folks that are building buildings that will appreciate over time, rather than just equipment that's going to quickly disappear. Things like that, things like giving priority to local businesses, things like putting more importance on wages or number of jobs relative to the amount of investment coming in. Those are all things we can explore and make sure we're tailoring it to what the city council is interested in.
So the details of the program are yet to be developed, right? What we're asking tonight is, does this sound like an area you want us to pursue going forward?
Councilor Ackerville.
I think I understand where the concept is going, and I too am interested in learning more when these details are kind of focused in on. And also, you make mention of the task force, and I think that's key and a critical part in this process to work with them. The one point at this phase one of the process that gives me pause that I want to hear more about is, as I understand the framework of the structure, is that we'd have the templates, right? And then it would come to council, and council would set up, we would essentially approve, right? That there would be a zone. So my point of pause is, what criteria will we use to make that approval? So that things are fair and, we're continuing to carry out what the original intent is, and we have something to work off of, you know what I mean? So it would never feel like favoritism to one project or another, or something like that. But we can really be acting on what the vision is. So I'm wanting to hear how that's clearly defined for us to act out with the program. Does that make sense? And I know that we're not there yet.
Right.
But at some point, I think that's going to be an important part of this.
Absolutely. And so part of the final product will not just be a spreadsheet, but will be the actual program, whether that's an ordinance or a resolution with administrative rules and code language that goes along with it, that identifies what it is you're trying to accomplish with this program. Ultimately, any urban renewal plan, that'll be the implementing document, will have to come between the urban renewal agency, the planning commission, and the city council before it's adopted, and have public hearings. And you can have any reason as a city council to choose not to move forward with an urban renewal plan. So there will always be the opportunity to say no to one of these things going forward. But by putting it in code and administrative rules and the ordinance of what the intent is now of this council, you're hoping to steer the ship in the future when folks do come in with this potential.
What we don't
programs.
want to do is, we don't want to have staff working, a process and then having it come to before a public body and there just be complete disavowal.
Right.
So we want some pretty clear direction on our end so that we can work with and negotiate with developers who may be looking to make investments.
Yeah.
I think it's valuable to have a tool, and the work that I've been doing with Greater Portland Inc. over the last couple of years, makes it clearer than ever to me that, as Mr. Vance says, site selectors are looking for what advantages are there to locate in one place versus somewhere else. And incentive programs have become a part of the landscape, whether that's good or bad across the country, that is a fact. And so just in terms of recognizing that and trying to position Wilsonville to have an attractive resource in the appropriate circumstances, is, I guess, what I would say, I think is potentially valuable to our community over time. Maybe not right today, maybe next year, who knows? But I think that it's true that we need to have some kind of an incentive program, and I would hope that we figure out what that was. The second point I want to make is that our history with urban renewal in Wilsonville is pretty positive compared to what's happened in a lot of other places, and I think we need to be careful to continue that. I think that a lot of that is a result of our engagement with the community, especially through the means of using an urban renewal task force where stakeholders from other taxing jurisdictions and other entities that are affected come together and we reach a conclusion jointly. So it's not just the city council saying, no, we know what's best, just we're going to do this, and I am very, very keen on continuing to use that mechanism. Now, we've also gone out to the public for votes from time to time. I'm not clear if this program is something that we would need to do that politically on. I guess I'd have to kind of see what this stacks up like before we would think about whether that was appropriate or not, and that might well be a discussion at the task force level.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, there's, what you would lose is some nimbleness.
Right.
If you were working with a specific developer and then you had to go out for a public vote, you would have to
I was
factor
thinking
that
more
in.
of like the whole program, the redefined program, whether that would be an approach that we might ask for a vote on, not a site-specific.
And we could raise that with the task force. In fact, we have, basically with the TIF zones, already gotten that, both with the public and with the task force, but we could simply go back and say, what do you think? Should we go back out since we're reforming?
Yeah, I think we should just put
We
that
could
on
do
the
that.
table
Yeah.
and ask.
But is there consensus to move forward with additional?
Council, you're interested in
Gathering.
moving this forward, Councilor Linville?
I just have one question, and that is, it seems to me that to get to this, we're asking that the Urban Renewal Task Force do a little bit more work than one meeting. Does that sound like what we might need in order to get
Yeah, we'd have to
something
see
to us?
what staff says, and I noticed on your Tiberius plan under the schedule thing, it noted the possibility of a task force meeting in October, which I don't think then happened.
No,
and-
we
and-
are a bit
and-
behind schedule.
And no subsequent task force meeting on your timeline, so.
Yeah, so this originally, I think we came up with this maybe in June, and we were hoping to move quickly through things, and it hasn't gotten started that quickly. But the task force, we want to strike a balance between using their time effectively, since these folks are all volunteering. We don't want to make them sit through, a dozen meetings. But you're right, with the complexity of this program, one meeting might be too little. So I think we will need to make sure we're striving to find that right balance to use them effectively.
And I guess the other, and I guess we'll know more about this when we get something a little bit more concrete to look at, but it sounds like the task force would, because we would be developing urban renewal districts, with each project, that they would have a larger role along the way, in each step. So, is that not correct?
Well, I don't think that's what we were envisioning. What
Okay.
what we would do with the task force is to go back and just basically give them a history of how we've used the TIF zones. Basically, we haven't used any of them.
Right.
And say that we've had some discussion with council, who's given us some direction to come back to you with a reformatted program. Get their weigh-in and buy-in, and then come back to council after we've done that. But I don't think it would be the intent that every time we would potentially use a program that we may or may not develop.
But the program as a whole.
The program, the specifics of the program, the criteria, they would want to definitely weigh in on all that.
Yeah.
A quick question.
Yes, Councilor West.
So this type of idea, the TIF, which is, you've told me, Jordan, is a little bit unique and it's not done a lot of places. And we're trying to make it be a cool tool for Wilsonville to attract business. But have they ever voted on this? Is this one of these issues that has come before the Wilsonville
Yeah.
voters that says, yeah, we're good with TIF zones?
Yes.
But we're just reworking something they've already approved?
It would basically be a reformatting of something that the voters have already weighed in on.
But did it not expire, so that initial thing, didn't you say it like ended the program?
The way we wrote those TIF zones is if they weren't used within a certain time period, that specific TIF zone would go away.
Okay, but we still have basically the thumbs up from the voters originally. This would still fall under that umbrella, you believe?
It wouldn't be any different. You would be asking the same question you've already asked, is what I'm
Okay.
suggesting.
Okay.
But you certainly can, as a council, tell us to go
Right.
back out. That's something that we could talk about down the road.
All right, so we got a consensus pretty much that this is the right track, and we want staff to go ahead with the development work? I'm
Okay.
seeing all nods,
All
so.
right, thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Jordan. Thanks, Tiberius.
Okay, we're a little tight, need to keep moving along. House Bill 2001 and 03 briefing, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Daniel Pauly, Planning Manager, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce two staff from the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. Jennifer Donnelly is the Metro Regional Representative, and Kevin Young is a Senior Urban Planner. They're here tonight to share information about these two House bills that their department is charged with helping to implement. As highlighted in the recent legislative summary presented to the council, these bills came from a significant discussion about housing during this last legislative session. The city was engaged and commented as these bills were considered, and the city comments are largely reflected in the adopted version of the bills. Tonight, then, is an opportunity to learn more about the bills and DLCD's role, get some questions answered, and provide direction to staff as they pursue the necessary work to comply with the statutes that come from these bills. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin. Yeah, and let me hand me the mouse.
While we're getting that set up, I'm Kevin Young, Senior Urban Planner with the agency. Also with me, Jennifer Donnelly, our Regional Representative, to assist. So I'm just going to step through House Bills 2001, 2003. I know we've got limited time, so I won't spend too much time on any one item here and try to pause for questions as we move through.
Yeah, let's not shortchange the questions. All the text was pretty much in the packet, so I think
Perfect.
your council has read almost all of this.
That's great, and I know you've seen our handouts and all of that kind of stuff, so that's fantastic. I do want to highlight that these are key elements. These are complicated bills. If you really want to understand every nuance, really, you need to read the bills. But for right now, let's talk about 2001. So obviously, we need to start by acknowledging this is pretty groundbreaking legislation, that although there are some cities in the nation that are adopting this, no other state has taken this on yet. So Oregon is at the leading edge of this effort to bring middle housing back to the neighborhoods. And I think the impetus for this, as you all know, has to do with housing affordability issues that we're seeing in Oregon. We're seeing them on the West Coast. We're seeing them in a lot of parts of the nation. This is an attempt to provide more housing choices for all Oregonians. And so it's often referred to as the middle housing bill. Why is it called middle housing? Generally, it's talking about a type of housing that used to exist in neighborhoods, say, prior to, say, 1950. Somewhere around 1950, zoning codes got a little more restrictive, and you started to see more of the single-family only neighborhoods. If you go to older portions of cities, you're going to see middle housing, some great examples of middle housing, duplexes, apartment buildings, even old cottage clusters. The part of Salem that I work in, there's 3 or 4 within a stone's throw of the state offices. So it's kind of bringing back some variety into neighborhoods from what used to be there and providing some different opportunities for people in different phases of life. Want to stress too, this is enabling legislation. It basically requires local governments to amend their codes to allow housing development to occur. There's nothing in the bill that forces change to occur here. And so a lot of this will be done incrementally over time based on individual property owner decisions. On 2003, there's really 3 big portions to 2003. The regional housing needs analysis is a kind of a different look at housing needs that moves beyond individual urban growth boundaries and looks at regional housing markets. This is something we're quite interested in. Oregon Housing and Community Services is the agency that leads this effort, and we are collaborating with them in developing this. It's basically a pilot project. We will be reporting back to the legislature, and we'll see what they do. They may say, this has some great ideas, we're going to roll this forward, or they may say, thank you very much, we'll put it on a shelf and we'll move on to some other good ideas. Also in the bill, and these are pieces that really have kind of new and ongoing obligations for us, is a new requirement for housing production strategies. And so this will apply to cities with population above 10,000, including Wilsonville, where following adoption of the housing and updated housing needs analysis, within a year, the local government will be charged with developing housing production strategies. Now, these are really, if you've done an H&A recently, and I'm sorry, I don't know whether that's the case or not. 2013. So likely you had at the end of that report some recommendations from your consultant that said, hey, here's some tools you can use to, develop more housing, more to meet your community's housing needs. That's pretty much what a housing production strategy is. It will move, I believe, beyond the realm of pure land use and pure planning to things like financial incentives and other tools that local governments can use. But the concept is to have the local government take a good look at the housing needs that have been identified and figure out some strategies for getting that housing developed in the community. So that will be a new requirement. And then required updates of housing needs analyses. This is a new requirement for all cities, population 10,000 and above. That schedule is every 6 years for cities within metro, every 8 years for cities outside of metro. All right, so this is the fun part, technical assistance. So the bills did include $4.5 million to support local government implementation. House Bill 2001 allocates $3.5 million for two things. One is to support local governments in development of middle housing codes. And the second is to address infrastructure constrained areas and to assist with the preparation of applications. These will come back to the agency for, for a time extension based on an infrastructure constraint in a specified area. I'll talk a little more about that later. And then lastly, House Bill 2003 allocates $1 million to assist with development of housing production strategies, housing needs analyses, and other elements of the bill. We are launching into rulemaking very soon. In fact, next week, our first rulemaking advisory committee will be meeting on the 14th, although we are still finalizing membership there, but we think we've got a good group. So before I get into the details, we've got 29 different interest groups represented from around the state from a variety of perspectives, including local government officials, public works experts, folks from the neighborhoods, affordable housing advocates, urbanized counties, a wide variety of representation there. And our goal has been to get a variety of perspectives helping us with these three elements of rulemaking. So the first one is the middle housing codes themselves. We are charged with adopting model codes for both medium and large cities, actually. So that's 10 to 25,000 and 25,000 and above. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But also potentially sideboards around the rules that local governments may develop to implement these requirements in addition to the model code. That's one piece of rulemaking. Secondly, rules around this infrastructure-based time extension request process. What information do local governments need to provide? What are thresholds we're looking at, et cetera? And lastly, housing production strategies. This is a whole new area for us. So, and our agency, DLCD, is charged with evaluating housing production strategies as they're adopted. So there will be a level of review involved as well. That might be a good place to stop if there are any preliminary questions.
Do you guys have professional expertise on staff to make those kinds of analyses, or would that be something you farmed out?
Which analysis?
Housing production strategies. It seems outside your bailiwick.
Yeah, it is. And so we're collaborating with Oregon Housing and Community Services, and that department has a wealth of knowledge in terms of financing and other governmental actions that can help to produce affordable housing. But even beyond that, our rulemaking advisory committee includes a number of folks who are involved in developing housing for low-income populations and meeting other housing needs. And we're going to rely pretty heavily on them as well. Okay, so get more into some of the specifics of House Bill 2001. So, did I skip one? No, I guess we started with large cities. So large cities, Wilsonville falls into this category. Are required to adopt, you may not feel that Wilsonville is a large city, but it falls into this bucket. So these local governments are required to adopt standards for duplexes, to allow duplex, and I think I'd talk about this in a little more detail. No, maybe I don't. Oh, that's right, I tailored this one to Wilsonville. So the duplex requirement is a requirement to allow duplexes on every lot or parcel on which detached single-family homes are allowed. So that is a fairly prescriptive, fairly defined requirement. We recognize that's going to take some work in terms of local codes. On the other middle housing types, triplex, fourplex, townhomes, cottage clusters, the requirement is slightly different, and that is to allow these types of housing in areas that are zoned to allow detached single-family dwellings. In areas versus every lot or parcel, there is quite a bit of discretion there. And so what we anticipate is that local governments may look to things like fourplexes, for example, and they may say, well, we're going to need a certain lot size. Maybe we want to look at access to transit, some other considerations that may get folded into where those might be best allowed within those areas. There's some interpretive questions here. I think there's going to be a robust conversation about this as part of the rulemaking effort that happens. But essentially, that is the requirement. Yeah.
Just clarification. I don't know if I'm understanding it totally. So if single-family homes are allowed on a certain lot, the developer can choose and say, no, we're putting a fourplex there instead. I don't quite understand. Yeah. I'm confused, sorry.
Well, no, that's a really good question. So this again, likely to be fleshed out a little bit in rulemaking is, what does the entitlement say about what may be developed on a lot? And what decisions can a property owner make subsequent to development? The way the bill's written, it really seems to be thinking about redevelopment. So I have an existing single-family dwelling. I want to convert it into a duplex. This enables that to happen.
Okay.
If you have a land use approval that says, no, I have approval to build a single-family dwelling, it's a different question. I don't have an answer for you today about how that will be interpreted, but I think rulemaking is likely to look at that question.
Does it supersede CC&Rs, private CC&Rs?
It does not. There is a provision in the bill that says all future CC&Rs may not prohibit accessory dwelling units or middle housing types. But if you have existing CC&Rs on the books, it's not retroactive. It doesn't rescind those existing CC&Rs. But I guess from this point forward, or from the implementation date forward, I would read that requirement as saying that prohibition cannot be expanded into new areas.
Well, we currently allow for ADUs in every residential area, right?
Yes.
How many have we had built?
Not many.
Yeah. So it hasn't been a market issue, it's been a market issue more than a kind of you can do issue.
Absolutely. And, I was at a meeting in Corvallis last week, and there was a lot of fear there about, well, student housing is driving the market, and we're going to see this transformation overnight. But I understand the fear, but we also looked at, for example, City of Portland, right, has recently made it very easy to develop ADUs, has waived SDCs for ADUs, which I understand you guys do as well. And they have seen, yes, an uptick in ADU production, but like 600 in the last year for the City of Portland. At that rate, every single-family dwelling in Portland will have an ADU in 300 years. So I mean, even for a large city with a very strong market, and ADUs, I would argue, are one of the most easily developed types of alternative housing. We're not seeing this complete transformation in a short period of time. Other questions?
One quick question. Is there anything regarding the bill, and I don't know if I was able to hash this out in the reading, that there's a certain requirement for cities to have a certain mix? Like, because I know Wilsonville already has a really strong mix compared to the rest of the state with our middle housing and multifamily versus single-family homes. We have a strong, much stronger mix than I think the rest of the metro area at least. And so is there anything about the rules changing depending on that mix or applying to having a certain level of mix or trying to get to that mix?
Not beyond the metropolitan planning rules that already apply to all cities within metros. You know, you've got, so the 50-50 mix and all that stuff already applies. So no, there's nothing new in the bill other than enabling these housing types in zones. And in the case of duplexes, it's every lot or parcel. But no, there's no particular target to say this is where you need to get to within 20 years or anything of that nature. There is, housing production strategies out of House Bill 2003. The goal there is really to do more to meet your community's housing needs, but it is not targeted at a specific mix. It's going to look at your future population, say, this is the demographics, this is the incomes we're looking at, and please do what you can to meet those needs. But beyond that, no specified mix.
Does the bill help bring multi-unit housing and more dense housing closer to services? So like if you wanted to focus some of that or mix some of that housing up, like, well, the Pearl's easy because it's super dense and it's super mixed, but it's also close to services. But in the suburbs, like there's certain neighborhoods that aren't close to necessarily transit as like, or like how we talk about town center, or does it give kind of the ability for the city to help develop those specific areas?
I don't think that's this bill. This bill is to get to the missing middle housing.
That's right.
And it's permissive, like, I would say it being more applicable. I can't see Meadows, because if it doesn't supersede those CCNRs, I can't see that becoming a hotspot for EDUs, but I could see it being more applicable out in Frog Pond East and South as we move forward with development. So my question would be, have we really looked at this from an infrastructure standpoint in terms of what our sewer plant and water plant and all that capacity is, and would that be a follow-on piece that we'd be looking at as a staff to determine whether or not we're going to have enough capacity to deal with the potential for all this influx of new housing? That's more of a staff question than a DLCT question.
Understood. Yeah.
I can make a quick comment on that. As I understand it, the bill actually puts a limit, first of all, that you can only assume a 3% increase in the new urban areas in terms of your infrastructure planning. But that said, the project that we're contemplating to implement this does look at infrastructure and make sure our plans are updated and ready and make those assumptions for what additions we're legally allowed to assume in terms of an increase.
So for the council and staff, I don't want to run out of time here. The question seems to me to be, do we want to be proactive in developing our own code modifications that we think benefit and fit Wilsonville specifically, or do we want to wait and see what the model code looks like, which then abbreviates the timeline considerably from what we might want to do internally? And how do we anticipate that this will be helpful or difficult to mesh with our ideas that we have pushed so strongly in the past, like neighborhoods with a mix of uses as opposed to a singular style of development throughout a broader area? And how much latitude does the city have to put design guidelines or other concepts in place that while true to the legislation, gives us some ability to influence the overall outcome? I mean, those are the kinds of questions that this raises in my mind.
Sure. So I put up the timeline, kind of skipped forward to our timeline for 2001 implementation to assist that conversation. What you'll see here is model code development that pertains to Wilsonville. Our target date for those rules would be September of 2020. The adoption deadline for the middle code for the large cities is end of June 2022. So actually quite a bit of time. I mean, I know these things take time and a year and a half is not a huge amount of time, but you will have some time to look at model codes, look at what comes out of rulemaking and decide whether you like the model code, you'd like to pursue funding, or do both and write your own code. So preliminarily, our local assistant grants, we're looking to cut those free starting immediately after the May rulemaking here. So that'd be probably June of 2020, and we'll have about a year to roll those dollars out.
Are you using LOC as part of League of Oregon Cities, as part of the task force, or?
Well, yes, we are coordinating with them in a couple of key areas. Now, we don't have staff from LOC. They recommended staff from local governments, and we will have representatives from local governments around the state in attendance there. We're also sharing with them our RFPs, because one of the things we're doing is assembling a team of consultants to assist local governments, and we want their input in that process as well.
Councilor Linville, you had a question?
I just had a good response to your question. And it seems prudent to me that we wait at a minimum until the rulemaking is completed. And I would suggest that the city also apply for the assistance grants. They're available through both of the House bills. So I anticipate that this would be significant work for our staff in modifying and developing new code and modifying the code that we currently have. So I would suggest that we at least wait until the rulemaking is completed, and in the meantime, apply for the funding grants.
Okay. Are we worried that $4.5 million is not very much to spread around the whole state, and it's going to be quite competitive?
Yeah, I think that's very possible. Yeah.
So earlier is better than later? Yeah.
Right, and I got to tell you, I mean, part of that goes to that infrastructure piece, and we don't know price tags on some of that work. Sorry.
Okay.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
How much more presentation do you want to run?
I can go over 2003 if you'd like, or if you'd like to just discuss, that's fine.
We have 5 minutes, and then I need to turn it over to Chris.
Yeah.
What would you prefer?
Well, Council, do you have questions? You'd like to have some discussion?
What specifically are you looking for?
Yeah,
Staff, what is it you'd like to know from
Yeah, you need
council?
direction in terms of where you want us to go. I mean, wait for rulemaking or go forward now, pursue different options.
What's your recommendation, Dan?
I think, we need to we need to shoot for what funding is available. So I think the timing, because we have a major work item, the timing between equitable housing strategic plan and the timing for the work we're going to need to do for Frog Pond East and South is critical, and being able to fit any of this co-work in between that and in the right way along with those projects is critical to our timing.
You have something on new business tonight tied to this.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that you would also like them to authorize that letter to be signed.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just checking.
So Councilor Linville has offered some specific suggestions. Any of the rest of council have a perspective with regard to those suggestions or any different suggestions? Councilor West?
I guess clarification is if we go ahead and not wait for rulemaking, does rulemaking happen and then we have to weigh back up, right? Like I feel like kind of caught here.
Well, the risk would be that you would get ahead of the rulemaking process, and all the work that you've done is for naught because it doesn't meet the standards.
Doesn't align,
and that's my concern a little bit is if we're too prudent here, then we're just kind of oops, and we spend all that resource and time, and then the rulemaking, we're subject to that. And,
Yeah.
Everything we did is for nothing. So that concerns me.
So that would suggest, let's not get too far ahead of the rulemaking, but let's be working on some of our strategies and things that would not be the subject of the rulemaking.
Exactly, and that's
Yeah.
what staff has in mind as well. Because
It's-
like the duplex piece, that's pretty well understood. I mean, every lot needs to allow for duplexes. So, I mean, some of that work can certainly move forward. It's some of the, what does the area zone mean? And certainly, as we scope the project and look at the rulemaking, the plan would be to phase the project in order to.
I mean, naturally, I would totally go into Councilor Linville's idea. That'd be my natural first, let's wait for rulemaking, but that sounds like that could be a really big risk for us.
I think we're suggesting that we do wait till rulemaking, right? We don't want to get ahead of the process.
Right, where we need clarification, but there's components of the project we can
Yeah,
do.
stuff that's not subject to rulemaking, we can get going on now.
Right.
And in concurrent with that, going after the technical assistance grant.
Correct.
So staff is going to be juggling several balls because we've got the housing thing we're working on already, and then we're going to have to be thinking about the strategy pieces, and then we're trying to plan for a Frog Pond East and South, but we don't want it to be contrary to the new coming rules that are not yet clear. And so other than that, we know exactly what we're doing.
We did talk about this when we were going through our goal-setting stuff in pretty much a lot of detail with Miranda and Dan in terms of what the capacity is and how it should all kind of line out. And this lines up with that discussion we had. So I feel comfortable that we can deliver on those.
Okay, that's good. Councilor Lynn.
I just had one question for Dan, and that is timing for the master plans for the Frog Pond, those two areas. Do you anticipate that planning would be farther out than 2022, or would it be done prior to that?
It has to be done in 2023, so.
Okay.
That's why, probably for our work program, it'd make more sense to move this as forward as we can.
Yes.
So to then move into Frog Pond East and South to get that done by the deadlines mandated by Metro, so.
Thank you.
All right.
You okay?
Yeah, that's great. Now we can bring Chris up.
All right.
We can
Thank you
talk
very
about
much. Appreciate it.
beautification,
Beautification.
subjective
So subjective.
lettering patterns.
This is the fun stuff.
This is too many options. There were
Oh,
too
man.
many
See,
options.
limit options, Chris. Remember what I told you?
We have
Yes.
so many now.
Give them one really bad
It's come a
choice.
long ways already.
They were all requested, so thank you. It's good to be back. Chris Namsu, Community Development Department. Thank you, Mayor, councilors. We are here tonight, hopefully, to try to choose a final design for the I-5 monument retrofits. If you recall, back in August, I came forward with two designs. We had the satin black background, painted background with the stainless silver letter, and we had a native concrete background with a navy blue letter with the addition of the welcome to and the logo. So at that meeting, there was general consensus, I would say, for the black and the silver letters. The council asked specifically for some additional logo designs that included the green logo, the green and the blue logo being placed on each of the signs, as well as a copper color to be introduced for additional conversation that more closely mirrors the Corten steel cabinet that the wayfinding plan used as its primary material. So in order to introduce these 8 new options, which I apologize, they hopefully a few of them just drop out for obvious reasons, but these are the 2 black with stainless steel. Introducing on the bottom, option 2 is a new option with the green and blue city logo in true city logo colors introduced onto the black background. Next are the copper colors with silver on top and then on the bottom with the green.
Sorry, Chris, every time you flip, I'm like, oh, I like that. Oh, it's nice.
And then moving to the column with a larger logo and stainless steel mounted to the brick, and the blue-green again with the black and silver option, option 4 on the bottom. And then the same 2 options with the copper color introduced for a total of 8 new options. So I don't know the best way to go about this, Mayor, which a straw poll or
The first one.
the first one.
No, wait a minute. Let's, to to me, some things jump out. And to me, the question of whether the logo goes on the major sign or goes on the column to the right of the sign is a fairly distinct difference. Is council ready to express an opinion on the location?
Where does the logo go?
The logo being behind Wilsonville on the center sign or being on the brick work? Can you show us those?
I have an
Like
opinion.
that? Pardon?
I have an opinion.
Okay, Councilor Linville? Just this one question.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I think that the larger size on the column gives more visibility to the logo than it does if it is put next to the sign. So
Okay,
that's my preference.
let's keep fairly tight here. Anybody else?
just go down the row?
Go, okay. you go.
All right, Councilor
Okay,
West.
I think that the brick causes it, especially in the blue and green, the brick causes it to get somewhat lost, and it's busy because there's a lot of lines behind a logo that's already a lot of lines. And I think you have a nice contrast when you have it against the concrete by the E, and I like it off the brick.
Okay, Councilor Lehan?
Well, I would go half and half on that because
I wonder what the staff thought.
But I agree, you can't put the color on the brick because you'll lose it. You can't even see it over there. But, so it would have to be white if it was on the brick.
That's stainless, I think, to match the sign, that's stainless.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
But it'd have to be white to be on the brick. The trouble with that is, I really like our colors.
That's not our logo.
I really like the colors in our logo. I think they're integral to the logo. So that's my issue. Either if it goes on the brick, it needs something behind it so that you can see it, because you can't see it on the brick if it's, as Councilor West said.
Black background or a blue background? Or
Yeah, something.
Or a stainless background?
Or a stainless background. Yeah.
That's not part of our option.
All right.
Visualize that.
So anyway,
Okay. Councilor
It's
Akval?
expensive.
I think that, yes, it is larger size when it's on the brick, but I agree that it gets a bit too busy, especially in option 6 there, because we don't have the contrast. And then the other thing is, the last couple days, whenever I'm driving past that area, I've been thinking about it. And we do have some vegetation around there, and I feel like that plus the brick, it made me concerned that it could end up kind of getting lost. Where, depending on how much vegetation we've got growing up, and if it's spring and all the plants have had a growth spurt or what, where it's a little bit more trim in the center area. So I liked having it in the center area.
So far, we do not have consensus.
Well, I'll throw mine in. I like it the larger size, as Councilor Linville said, on the side. I agree it kind of gets lost in the colors. My solution would be to put a stainless background behind the color and leave it on the brick column. And trim the bushes if we have to,
May I make just another comment?
Yeah.
As it relates to the color, I've done a lot of, if you ask Notre Dame what their logo looks like, they will never change the color. They will never make it all white or all black or whatever. The logo is the color and the shape. So I would not support anything that did not have the color, because I think that is what the logo is. That's my opinion.
All right, so Chris, can you show us just the one with the name again? Logo with the name?
Logo with the name.
Yeah, like that.
Got it.
All right. Do you feel like that stands out? Does that show what you want to show?
Are you talking about option 2?
Which
Is that-
background do you want?
One or two? Does it show, does the logo look like you want to display it for the city?
Show the bronze. It looks better with the bronze.
Why does it have the outline on the bronze?
To make it stand out.
it has an outline that it
For the
doesn't have on
color,
the
why
other
does,
one.
yeah, but it didn't have that on the black. I didn't understand that.
I think it's just a graphic.
Back it up on it, take.
Attention.
See, the outline's
There's no
gone.
It's there, I
outline.
think it's just a bad PDF. I don't think there's any intent behind,
So
This is a
so would not be,
huge
would not be outlined.
no.
Yeah. All right, so on the sign or on the post? On the sign? People, come on, vote on the sign. Who wants on the sign?
On the sign.
One?
That's
I want it on the
what
sign.
Two.
Like it is now?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the
this.
sign.
In the center or on the brick? That's what you're
On the,
asking,
yeah, I'm
right?
asking about
brick or
with,
no brick,
with the
right?
word,
Yeah,
with the
brick.
word or on the brick. So who favors with the word?
I'd say with the word.
With the word.
With the brand.
3,
And
And who favors on the brick?
2.
And, but I would
I'm
say.
I'm not gonna die on this sword.
That's not the hill you're going to die on? Okay.
It's only your how many, third meeting? You don't want to die yet?
I'm ready
Save it for something special.
That's
But I would, let me just say, back to the winning one there. That one, yeah.
It didn't win.
Well, it had 3. I would scooch the words over a little bit, so even if they're
Oh,
not
now we're going to
centered,
fudge it, yeah.
and make that logo bigger, because it's not big enough there.
Yeah, that was
If
why
we're
we went to
going
the
with
brick, is to get it bigger. That was our
Yeah, yeah,
discussion
yeah.
last time. yeah.
But I think you could do that and keep it in there. But it needs to be bigger with the word.
It'd have to be up higher, not aligned with the word, so it looks like it's supposed to be a letter, but it's not a letter.
Yeah, yeah, well, but if it's bigger, it'll grow up there.
Counselor West?
I think contrast is incredibly important, and it is the best and easiest to visualize. And I think that it looks super clean when it's in stainless. And I think that I like that contrast in that first option. Yeah, I don't know, that, I like that. And like the Ducks, they have a new color for every logo
All
every
right, that's
game.
not relevant.
I fought
I thought
that
this,
for
I thought this was
years.
going to be the easy question to resolve.
Or you could just glitter it and it would really stand out.
So far, what you
Just
have
bling it
the
out.
logo with the words. You haven't decided color of
Color
wording
or
background.
stainless, you know.
Is glitter an option on the
It's always an
record?
option.
Is blinging it an option? Disco balling it.
I have a hard time because it just looks like it runs on the end of the word there to me. but-
Yeah, I think so too.
But with
That's,
the color, it stands out.
I would send it back to the artist. What do you think? We're a bunch of artists? But, and tell them what we like about it and what we don't like about it. We're still concerned that it doesn't pop enough, that the logo, we'd like to have the logo in color, but we'd like it to pop better than it does. Do you do that best with size, or do you do that with spacing, or do you know,
Do
adjust
you
the
offset
color
the,
of-
do you offset the word so it's not symmetrical center?
Yeah,
Do you,
yeah.
what do you do? You know?
Yeah,
You have to make the
well-
word Wilsonville smaller in order to make the logo bigger.
Well,
I would put it on the brick and not adjust the word, but that's just me.
You don't need to center Welcome to Wilsonville if you're centering the whole logo.
Right, that's a different approach, yeah.
It's a different approach.
So you want the
That's-
logo to pop more, is what I heard.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I'm fine with asking the artist people to give us 3 more things that
Okay.
that do
Okay, we can
that.
do that, but do we agree that you like the stainless steel lettering with the black background? Have you agreed
Yeah.
that?
No, we haven't
No, 'cause
discussed
I
that
liked
yet.
it.
Okay, I
Other
thought
one too.
I thought we hadn't voted on that, but.
No, we haven't.
Oh, okay.
So you've got the black background, you got the brown background, and apparently the light background is not in the mix anymore?
There's a blue
Is
letter.
this brown? Is this brown?
This is brown,
This is the
yeah.
copper,
Copper.
tin, whatever.
There's a blue lettering one, right?
No,
Yeah,
well,
there's
you have to go
a-
way back to the start. That
That
one, yeah,
With
Or
the
the black
just
lettering, right.
gray background.
which is not shown with a colored logo, but that's all right.
It's a good contrast.
Opinions?
I have one,
Yes,
always.
Counselor Ackerman.
The option 4, which was the brown, yeah. So my only issue with this when I was like flipping through them is this outline. So I would just want to have that clarified, like, because the outline makes it less sharp. The
The
logo
logo outline.
becomes less sharp.
Yeah, we can get rid of that.
So I'm wondering why that is on there and
right.
just get confirmation on that, because that seems like.
Why don't you just,
But the question was color option on the background, copper or
I
black?
like both copper and black.
why can't you just flank the Wilsonville with a logo on each end and balance it if people are worried about balance? If there's
That's
room on each
redundant.
side, just flank it with the
Nah,
logo.
No.
Is it too busy?
Too busy.
Yeah, too busy.
Too busy.
It'd be hidden behind that sign on the left, you know?
I'd do it asymmetrical, move it over, make the whole thing symmetrical,
Yeah,
so it doesn't look like you forgot to put something on that other side.
yeah. Push the word over to balance it, and, yeah.
It will work it out.
Nobody's answering the question about brown
like
or black. You like black?
Black.
Black,
I like black.
black.
I liked them both. My only issue with the brown was the outline. But I like them both. I like black, so that means that there's overlap. I like black. Right?
I don't mind black.
All right, that's.
I mean, I don't mind brown.
Silver letter, black background, and a popping logo.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about as clear as I think we're going to get, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, we've narrowed it from 8 to down to like probably 3 at the most now, right?
I don't know.
Chris, thank you for your patience.
No, it's not a
Thank you.
problem at all. This is the fun part of the
No.
job, believe it or
Thank
not.
God we're not doing paint colors in here or something. You know, that would be.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go with that. Anything else we need?
Yeah,
Right.
one more, I'm gonna hand it up to you, because I'm having on good authority that the folks from Meadows might show up tonight to talk about parking. So this is a list of everything we've done. One of the things that we've done that apparently they didn't like was the signage
We
about.
put signage up there, and Barbara announced that, and then they sent an email saying, why didn't you check with us before you put signs up?
Well, we could have checked with them, but we have no space down there. There's a retaining wall on one area, and the other one is right up against the edge of the sidewalk. So, and we have these all over the city. This is what I've been told, so this is not a new thing.
Yeah,
So I don't tell people where to put the signs. We just say we want the signs, and then Public Works puts them where they
yeah.
go.
And the state rule is about the 20 feet from the
Right, we
corner
don't have
and
any
whatnot,
local
yeah.
code or ordinance
Yeah.
to cite, so we have to follow ORS. So we
Yeah.
measured 20 feet back from the curb, and that's where the sign ended up.
Yeah. All right,
Recall, I did bring up the issue of sign clutter,
I know. I mean, the other option is we can take the signs down.
take the sign down, yeah, but I mean,
We could still enforce without
Try
the
to
signs.
enforce
Quick question. Can we paint the curb and then take the signs
We
down?
don't paint curves just because it becomes a maintenance burden, and we've said no to that throughout the city.
Okay.
So, as a policy, we don't paint curves.
Okay.
Plus, it ends up in the storm drain.
Oh,
We like our fish.
we do like our fish. We do.
okay, let's call our work session adjourned at 6:56, and we will reconvene downstairs. Thank you.
Did you get to go to the arts?
I did, I worked at the arts.
I wanted to.